Howdy, friends, and welcome back to the show. My guest today is Meagan Flannigan, a retired commander in the United States Navy with over 20 years of service and over 1,200 hours flying the famed F-14 Tomcat and F-18 Super Hornet. She was deployed to the Arabian Gulf aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2005 and 2006, and the documentary Speed and Angels follows her and a fellow naval aviator through their process of becoming a fighter pilot. This was overall a unique and incredible experience for me. I had actually never met Meagan until a day or two before I had her on the podcast. I went to Montana to record a couple other podcasts, and I've actually had her husband, Paul, on the show before, episode 29. And I hit him up saying, hey, I'm in the area, would love to connect in person. He invited us to their house. We had a lovely dinner, and he was like, hey, man, you should actually have Meagan on the podcast. She's pretty cool. They entirely undersold how incredible she is and her story. They said, hey, you should go watch this documentary, Speed and Angels. So we did, and it's freaking insane. It really is. So I said, yeah, absolutely, would love to have you on the podcast. Drove back up to that area, and the rest is history. But in this conversation, we discuss how Top Gun changed her life as a young girl, pretty much the exact instant she knew she wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's a really cool story. Rising through an extraordinarily competitive career as oftentimes the only woman or one of a few women in every room, and what that was like. The challenges that she faced, living on an aircraft carrier, missions in Iraq, and also the absolute insanity that it is to land a fighter jet on an aircraft carrier. And we go into detail, or she goes into detail rather, on how absolutely insane that is and the challenges that it presents. But all in all, this was an incredible conversation. I feel very blessed and grateful to be able to have had it and to be able to spend time with Meagan and Paul. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. It was an honor to sit down with Meagan. Here's a conversation. Meagan, thank you so much for allowing me into your home and also doing this. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I have to first apologize for never having seen
Top Gun,
the original Top Gun.
We'll let it slide.
Yeah, I'll watch. That's my homework. I'll watch that soon.
Good.
The second thing, I want to thank you for your service. It really is pretty incredible. And I also want to say what a masterful job you did and Paul as well, at hiding how freaking cool you are at dinner the other night. I left and I looked at my dad. We watched Speed and Angels, the documentary. And I'm like, wait a second. Like, wait, what just happened? I had no idea. So that's freaking
That's
cool.
Nice of you to say. No, Paul always reminds me that like his stuff's cooler than mine. When we first started dating, he had a bicycle shop, and I was like, oh, guys always, or sort of civilians are always intimidated to date military, like a fighter pilot. He's like, I work on bikes all day. Like it's not that cool.
Well, both very cool, but not what I was expecting. Because in our conversation, he was talking about. He said something about you being in the Navy or something like that. So I understood that.
Yeah.
And then we started talking down here at dinner, and my dad asked what you do, and you said, what do y'all say? Naval aviator?
Yeah.
And then he said, what do you fly? And you said like F-14's and F-18's. And I'm like, wait a second. Those are, I think I know. And then, but it just didn't even add up until we watched the documentary. We're like, holy crap. But yeah, that's
if you'd seen Top Gun, it would be more poignant because that was the thing. I was like that plane.
Yeah, well, yeah, I want to get into that because I read in an article that was written about you, how that was like kind of the exact plane that you saw.
Yeah,
and that's actually my first question is, I know the answer, but what was the impetus of your fighter pilot dream?
Yeah, well, it's funny when I was young. I thought I was good at math. And so I wanted to go to Notre Dame because for some reason I like Notre Dame and I wanted to be an accountant because I thought people who could do math were accountants. So that's literally what I always said I wanted to do when I was young. And then when I was around 10, my parents were watching Top Gun. It had come out and it was on cable, and we had made a fort, and I sort of pretended to be sleeping, and I watched the movie, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what this is, but this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And the next day I was like, I want to be a fighter pilot. And I want to fly those, And at the time, I didn't, you're a kid, you're 10. I think kids all like, I want to be a SEAL. I want to be an astronaut. That's what you do. But something about it had really just taken hold. And I just never faltered from that point on. I was like, this is what I want to do. And I was just super lucky because my parents were both educators. And so, it's back it's 1990, it's not that there's no internet, there's no way to sort of capture that. So they started talking to their guidance counselors and learning more. And they found out fairly quickly that women couldn't be fighter pilots at the time, but they never told me that. They just were like, if that's what you want to do, like, you're going to figure it out. And my dad was like, you can go to this place called the Naval Academy, and when you graduate, you can be a fighter pilot. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do then. And again, like, didn't really understand if that was hard or easy to do. Just knew this is this thing I want to do later, and this is the path that will get me there. And then just, started working in that. And that's like a whole long story we can dive into if you want. But I will say it was pretty cool to see a movie with a specific airplane, fall in love with that idea, and then work for basically 14 years and go through a lot of different trials of getting into the academy, getting into flight school, getting into jets, and then finding out that I'm selected to the F-14, and I was in the very last class that screened for Tomcats because they were decommissioning the airplane.
Wow.
So there were 4 pilots that were in the last group, and I was one of the 4. And then I got to go and fly the exact airplane from the movie.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been cool regardless, but do you think there would have been like some, like, oh, damn it, if it was like the next plane? Like, if you didn't get ever
at
fly
the time,
F-14?
I was excited to, like, the Super Hornet was the brand new jet that and that would have been cool too. Like, any of it would have been cool, but there is something really sexy about the Tomcat. Like, there's an aura around it that, it was definitely, like, it would have still felt amazing, right? But there is something to say, I had this dream and this image in my mind as a little girl, and then to go and do that exact thing, that was like, I'm very proud of that. It was very satisfying. It was very gratifying, to know that you worked really hard and the things that you'd sort of sacrificed to get there, to get to do the exact thing that you wanted. I think cool. we all hope that something like that can happen for us once in our life.
Yeah, and it's very cool to hear your parents almost like willfully allowed you to be blind, because imagine if they were like, no, you can't do that.
Right. Which I think a lot of parents would do, and not in a mean way, just in like wanting to set expectations or not have your kids, set a goal that they don't think could be achieved. But I think they just sort of, they knew me and they knew things were changing. And I think maybe they were optimistic that those rules would change, or knew that I was just young enough that there's enough time.
Maybe you'd forget it.
Right. Who knows? Right. Or maybe it was like many kids who say they want to do something and then they want to do something different a year later. But I think a big reason that I was successful without question were my parents, my sisters, my family. There were a lot of people who at that time frame because I was just a really confident, I came out of the womb very like, I've got this, here I am world. And so I just had no qualms about 13-year-old walking around. I'm going to the Naval Academy. I'm going to be a fighter pilot.
Like, so if I was like your family friend and you're not 11 years old, hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Naval Academy. I'm going to be a fighter pilot. Like, that was my answer from 10 on.
That's awesome.
And I would tell everybody, when I went to Girl Scout camp and I had to have a camp name, it was Maverick. Like, when it was, like, everything was Navy, Tomcat, fighter pilot, Naval Academy. And it wasn't if that was going to happen. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And my parents were just 100% supportive of that. And they were like, here, and they really helped me prepare. And these are the things you have to look at. And this is how you start building your application to get to the Naval Academy and all the things. Right. And I worked really hard to get there. And I think I could have done it in a different situation, but I think having like just one person that's totally in your corner, that's rooting for you. And I had more than one person.
Yeah.
I had my immediate family, my extended family. We had this amazing community that I grew up with, and they all knew, and they were like, yeah, Meem's going to go to the Naval Academy. That's what she's going to do. So that was like, I was very, very fortunate and privileged to have that kind of support system, because that wasn't an easy dream at the time.
When you decided it was a thing, it literally wasn't a thing.
Exactly. It was like, not a thing.
It's almost counterintuitive. It's almost like, well, it's kind of dumb.
Right. Like, why are you setting yourself up to fail? But I just never saw it that way. And then just if you sort of break down the components of that, just going to the Naval Academy is hard. And then just getting a pilot spot out of the Naval Academy is hard. And then just getting a jet spot is hard. Like, so every time there was a sort of a selection and a process that would restart. And every time I was shooting for something that was a competitive thing in its own right. So there were a lot of times that a door could have been slammed in my face. or timing could have hindered my ability to get where I wanted to go. So there was a lot of hard work, but there's also a lot of luck with timing along the way that really worked in my advantage. Case in point, when I graduated the academy, so I got into the academy, I was there from 98 to 2002, and I was an aerospace engineer, majored in the astronautical track. Where I used to be like a 5.0 weighted GPA high school student.
Great.
And then I was like, please God, let me get a C in this engineering class. Cause it was so hard. And there are a lot of people at the academy that will say, poli-sci fly. Cause if you get better grades, you're ranked higher. And the way you service select at the end of your 4 years is based on your ranking. And so a lot of engineers get worse grades. They're ranked further down. They don't get what they want. But I was like, no, I'm really into space. I want to keep that door open if I want to try to do astronaut someday and blah, 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 blah. Got my, I graduated as an aerospace engineer. I had like a 2.94. I really wanted to be able to round it to a 3.0, but it just wasn't my destiny. But that I graduated basically right in the middle of the class. We graduated with like 950 people. I was probably like 502. So I was high enough to get a pilot spot, thank God. It wasn't a shoe-in. Like I wasn't walking into service selection thinking I've got this in the bag. I definitely had friends who didn't service select pilot, but I was low enough in the process that when we picked our flight school dates, because you find out what you service select at the Naval Academy, and then you'll have service selection night. And on service selection night, you go, and if you're an aviator, you'll pick when you go to flight school and where you go to flight school. So by the time I got to pick, I could either go in January, basically one of the last start dates for our class, and just sit and sort of do nothing for 6 months, or I would have to give up some of our automatic basket leave after graduation and basically go almost directly to flight school. And I was just like, I've been waiting for so long to do this thing. I don't want to wait. So let's just go to flight school and we'll give up some leave. And if I hadn't done that,
the F-14?
Right. I would not have flown Tomcats, which like my life would be so different right now. I can't even imagine.
So?
Oh yeah. Like I could have gotten Hornets out of Lemoore instead of being in Oceana and Virginia Beach. I never would have met Paul, all the people that have made these big impacts on me. And just the experience of flying and deploying in the Tomcat in the last deployment, transitioning to another airplane, like all that set me up for different career experiences that made me who I am today, right? So just that one little choice, as is true in most lives, right? Like had such an
inflection point for sure.
Absolutely. But like, thank God I did it, because then I went to flight school, and flight school had been horribly backed up, where people were like sitting for a year before they were doing jet training. And I always tell people I kind of joined as the accordion came together and all the backups had stopped. And so it was taking normally people 2.5 to 3 years to get winged. And I was winged through all of my training in a year and a half.
Holy cow.
So like I went 2 weeks early.
And that's what's documented in
in Speed and Angel. Like they
the
referred,
back part at least.
Well, yeah, like so for naval aviation training, you'll start and you'll go through initial flight training, and then you go through advanced flight training, and all that time is pre-wings. So when you finish all your training, you get your wings of gold, which is definitely a big landmark.
Do you still have those?
Yeah. I still have mine. I've like told my eldest daughter is currently saying she wants to go to the Naval Academy and be a fighter pilot. We'll see, but I'm like, if that happens, I'll give you my wings whenever you get your wings.
That would be cool.
Which would be really cool.
Full circle moment.
Yeah,
right there.
Totally. I would be very proud.
I have to interject. I had a dumb moment the other night. I look up and I'm like, "Are those your goggles?" And you're like, "Well, those are from World War II." So I'm like,
we're getting a little bit more current stuff, but I mean, I can't blame you. You hadn't seen Top Gun.
Yeah.
So
Now I'm just trying to imagine you flying like an F-18 with those things on. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't add up.
Not quite the same. Yeah, totally.
I actually want to get your opinion on Top Gun as a movie, because I know, like, especially like military movies, military personnel will have they'll be able to know the nuance.
Yeah.
So what's your actual opinion of the movies? I think you might be biased because it's like.
I obviously love the first one.
Yeah.
It's why I flew the airplane. I love them both. Like, are they tactically realistic? No. But like, would we expect them to be? No. Are they really fun action movies that get you super excited about the military and aviation and what that's about? Yes. Does that music from the opening scene still take me back to that 10-year-old watching the movie and think about the airplane? Yes. All that stuff's so fun. And I think it highlights a lot of the camaraderie and the buffoonery and the silliness of squadron life, but also at its heart what it's all about, which is deploying and losing shipmates and fighting wars and doing things that are way beyond volleyball games and singing in bars. But I think it just shows both sides of those things, which I think is really cool. And I love that it's a huge recruiting engine. It's why I am here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
It's
it
a
works.
phenomenal move by the Navy. I really.
Yeah, right. And we can talk shit to the Air Force because our movie's better than theirs. So
Do they
I
have a
mean,
movie?
it's a win-win. Oh God, what do they call it? Iron Eagle, I think.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
like
I've
some
never seen-
bad Air Force wanna be as cool as Top Gun movies.
One thing I love, I am not in the military. One thing I love is like the banter between like the Navy, Army, Air Force, and all that. I think it's
Oh, yeah.
absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
It reminds me of kind of in my life, just like baseball players on different teams. Like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
all kind of like in the same arena, but it's
Yeah.
like okay, just giving.
No, totally.
a little shit.
I like all the shit talking and like, you know, the Army Navy game and all the things, and that we can joke around and who's better and who's best. But then when it comes down to the fighting, like everyone's really on one team, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to go back to the 10-year-old you, because I'm just thinking like I'm trying to imagine being your parents the next day. Yeah, I'm gonna be a fighter pilot, and then literally like the next however many decades of your life are
Dedicated to that.
are in order with that. Like that actually
Yeah.
happened. Was there like a particular scene other than I guess the first scene where you're like that you remember watching the first time?
I remember like the scene that I would always go back and watch in the movie were the dog fighting scenes. So like you haven't seen it, so that's awkward. The last scene
Don't
is like
spoil
this
it.
big battle, similar to the second movie, right? There's sort of like this building thing, and then at the end there's the big sort of air-to-air combat scene. That was the part that I always liked. Yeah, I would go back to the flying clips. Yeah, I like the volleyball scene too. What girl didn't? But it was the flying stuff that I would like go on the VHS tape and fast forward to.
Nice.
Yeah.
And in Speed and Angels, which one thing that's cool is it really gets into your family and like the dynamics between you and your sisters. Did your sisters watch the movie too?
Yeah.
And they were just like, yeah, whatever.
They were just like every other kid. Yeah, it's okay. You know
That's
what I mean?
cool,
Like,
and you're like-
whatevs. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, that just changed my life. And
That's
they're like,
pretty funny.
okay.
One thing that was cool, I thought, I wasn't expecting it. When your sister was talking about how like they weren't for the war and they weren't all for that, but they were like so supportive of you. I thought that was a really cool picture into your family, I guess, and also how much more difficult it might have been if they like you didn't have if your sister and like your immediate family were like, hey, we don't want you.
Yeah,
support what
I
you're
think
doing.
it'd be so like I think that really takes me back to sort of what the experience of so many Vietnam vets were. You know what I mean? Going and fighting a war where on the home front there was such a lack of support, and what that must have been like coming home to that. Like it's hard enough to go and leave your life and like go on deployment and everybody keeps living and all these things keep happening and you're just not there. I can't imagine having that experience and coming back and there's a resentment or a lack of support, or when you have injuries, mental or physical, and people, you know what I mean? People can't be there to support you. So yeah, I say it all the time, like having supportive family or friends or whoever that community in your tribe is. I've been very, very blessed in that part of my life, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, that's a great point because it's hard enough to do those things, to go deploy and, like you said, kind of just pick yourself up out of life
Yeah.
while everybody else keeps living, and then you come back, and then coming back, and if everybody was like, I can't even imagine, just
Right,
not
like,
supportive
oh,
of
what were you
yeah.
doing? You're
Yeah.
you're an asshole, or I can't believe you're hurting, whatever, anything like that, right? Because then there's, I mean, there are people that go into these conflicts and they are killing people, and like it doesn't matter if you know you're there for the right reason, and you feel really like good and all those things. That's a heavy thing to process in your own right. You know what I mean? So you've got to. You really would hope that there'd be good support when you come home and you're sort of processing that in your mind, and what was I just doing, and what impact did that have on others, and all those kinds of questions.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool part of the documentary. In my opinion, I thought that was like a really cool detail that they kept that in there. As you were going through high school and college, were you? I mean, I'm assuming because we had ROTC at my high school. I don't quite remember anybody. I mean, I'm sure there were. I was friends with more of like the baseball, basketball guys. But were you the only like female that was like dead set in your class, or did you do ROTC?
No,
Was
so
that
we
a
didn't
thing?
have junior ROTC at my high school.
Okay.
But I was definitely the only kid in my class that wanted to go to a service academy at all. And I don't think there were any that went. There was I'm trying to think of there was a guy 2 years ahead of me from like a different school that I know that went to the Naval Academy that I was friends with. But that was it. There just weren't other people going that path. I think there were definitely people who were going to enlist or just join the military after, but I was definitely the only person I knew who wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the Naval Academy, the percentages are way up now. When I was there, you would start with, and I hope someone doesn't watch this and say I'm totally off, but I think you started with maybe like 20% of the class would be female, and then that number would go down because you would lose more women than you would men. But most classes started around 1,200 people and graduated, 950 to 1,000.
So they're not very big schools. I didn't.
No, the classes are pretty small. And then my class, I think we graduated with maybe 100 girls. So like within your company, which the way the Naval Academy is structured is there's 30 companies in each company. Each grade has about 30 people in it. So in my company, we had, I should know that 5 girls that stuck around for the whole thing. Me, Bridget, Megan. Yeah, 5.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's smaller group. And then like I was sort of saying earlier, as I sort of hit all of these sort of check valves on if I'm going to get to do the thing I want to do, just as all those things got harder and you to reset, they got more and more fine-tuned with women. So like high school, lots of girls. Naval Academy, a little bit less. Flight school, like, whoa, there's not that many here. Then we go into primary flight training, and there are a couple of girls in my primary class, but like most ended up going helos or big wing. And when I got to my advanced flight training for jets in Kingsville, Texas, when I arrived, there was one female instructor who I think was on maternity leave at the time. There was one other female student. She winged my first week and was gone. And then I was the only female on the base.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, okay, this I feel I'm very much the only woman here.
Yeah. And you could I'm sure you could tell, like, it's not like,
yeah, it's really
that hard to figure out.
Well, interestingly enough, all the way, like the academy, it was just like, I've got all these brothers, and it was like this, such a tight group of friends, so much trust, so much like, there were enough girls, you didn't really feel like, I don't know, it just didn't feel as isolating. And then through flight school, same thing. Like, these are my buddies, there's no difference. Like, it's just about how you perform in the jet, all the things. And I sort of lived in a bubble in that way where I don't know if it was just my personality and it wasn't getting to me. I was just being treated like everybody else. And then when I got to the Tomcat RAG, the first guy I met was a student, Rio, who was in the squadron, and literally the first words out of his mouth, someone introduced me, and they're like, yeah, she's joining whatever class as a pilot. And he's like, they blacklisted women from flying Tomcats. What are you doing here? And I was like, oh, it's nice to meet you.
Very nice.
And when I got to the Tomcat RAG was the first time there was a lot of like, and there hadn't been another female pilot for, I want to say like 3 or 4 years. Mumbles was before me, who was in my squadron, the squadron I would ultimately go to. But I think there had been a fairly big gap. And then, I do a fighter chick reunion every year, and with a couple of the girls there's a couple Tomcat chicks. And I was like, let's just make a list. And so we tried to write down, because we had enough spacing between all of us to sort of all have been in the squadrons when women were flying. And we wrote up a list, and it had 20 Rios and 10 pilots. And those are the only names we could think of in the history of the airplane. So like, there just were not a lot of women. And then I was also at the sundown of the Tomcat. So it's like there were 8 or 9 squadrons, and they were starting to decommissioning them. And I was an ensign. I'd gotten through flight school really fast. So it was very quickly, I was getting a lot of whispers of like, there's a female pilot ensign at the RAG, and I'm like, why is this such a thing? So it was definitely something that I felt much more intensely once I joined the Tomcat community. Which was interesting because somehow that sort of hadn't registered with me until that point.
What's a Rio?
Great questions. Sorry. So in naval aviation, a naval aviator is a pilot. So if you hear naval aviator, that's a pilot. If you hear naval flight officer or NFO, that's basically anyone that's functioning in the airplane who is not the pilot. So in a Tomcat, that is a radar intercept officer or a RIO. They're the person who sits right behind the pilot. And in the Tomcat, they ran the radar, as the name implies. They would do the pod for like the air-to-ground weapon systems, do comms. And the Tomcat was a really great task sharing airplane. You cannot fly, you could not take a Tomcat and soloize it. You had to have someone in the back seat to fly the airplane because there were critical things that needed to be done in the back. In the F-18, the NFO is called the Weapons Systems Officer, or WISO. And in the F-18, it's a task shedding airplane, meaning you can soloize the back seat. You don't need to have anyone in there. And so instead of having this really cool crew coordination where we're like, we're a team, you do your thing, I do my thing, and together we're like super efficient and we're this great machine. And the Super Hornet and the Hornet, it's more, it depends on sort of the tactical crew coordination that's being used, but it can be, well, I'm going to do everything I can do, and then when I'm getting maxed out, I'll shed things. And so that community, when we transitioned, it changed the dynamic of those, like all the Tomcat squadrons really kind of didn't like the way that was, because we were big believers in this is a tactical crew and we can do more together. But a lot of single seat Hornet guys and Super Hornet guys will be like, I don't need a Wizzo. Like, you know, and I'm like, you can't run it all by yourself, man. Like there's too many systems. It can be done better as a team. But so you get sort of single set mafia, or, you know, single seat mafia, and you just have different opinions about that kind of stuff based on where you started.
There's another part in the documentary where I can't remember the exact part, but it was basically you saying, you kept on hearing like, no, you can't, and then it gets dramatic, and you're like, watch me.
Yeah,
it's really cool scene. What got you through like all the no, you can'ts? Because as you are well aware of, I'm sure you got a lot of those.
Yeah, I think it's just a mindset of kids. Like I look at my kids now, and I like how kids come out of the womb and nature versus nurture. And I just was always a kid who was like, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Like no one tells me what I can't do, and I just was I've always been a very persistent person. And I really wanted that thing. Like, and I wasn't going to have someone tell me no. So it almost worked in a positive way because I was going to go after it anyway. And then having someone tell me I can't do it, I want to do it just that much more to give you like a little. So I think it was a little bit more motivation. So that was like, it just helped drive more than anything. But like once you get there, sort of once you're in the squadron, it's very complicated, right? Because you want to fit in and you want to be a part of this unit and you want to be in the jokes and you want, you know, it's like if you're on a team, you want to be a part of that team. And figuring out how to integrate, for me, I did it so wrong for a while. Like I look back at how I was when I got to my fleet squadron and I was so desperate to be like one of the guys. Like I'm going to tell the dirty jokes. I'm going to laugh at everything and nothing offends me. And I'm going to be just this version of myself that I think I need to be to do that. But then like I realized this wasn't work. Like I wasn't happy in that way. And I also realized after a while that it didn't matter how much I tried to act like one of the guys. I was never going to be one of the guys. I was always going to be the token woman that's sitting in the room. And instead of being like ashamed or embarrassed or trying to like hide that or minimize that, I just started to own that and just, you know, like I don't have to think that joke is funny and I don't have to laugh at that and I don't have to fit in with this group. Because no matter what I do, I'm sort of on the outs a little bit. And that actually eventually became fairly empowering because then you just realize you don't have to like play you know what I mean? Yeah. You can just be your authentic self. And honestly, when I started dating my husband, Paul, who you know, coming and talking to him, and he was the first civilian guy I dated since like sophomore year at the Naval Academy. Like it had just been, you're surrounded by these people who you're working with all day. And then in a military unit, you're partying all weekend and then you're going on detachments and you're spending so much time together that it's just natural that the people that you're around and you're in the officers club with and you're like, those are the people. So like I dated I dated an Air Force guy when I was in flight school. I dated a Navy guy when I was at the academy, like he was the first civilian I dated. And I remember coming home and I would sort of tell him about stuff that was happening at work and he would just be appalled. And he was like, that is not okay. That is not funny. Like, you should not be putting up with that. And his dad was in the Air Force and he had this strong sort of moral code. And he's just a man of values. And he's like, that's not okay. And so that sort of snapped me out of it too and helped me realize, yeah, you're right, that's not okay.
Well, because you're in like a bubble.
You're totally like, you just become conditioned to this is normal, right? And, we were talking the other day when you were over for dinner, but like you go on deployment and I do really feel like it becomes Lord of the Flies. You get pulled away from your normal like connective tissue to what's appropriate in a society and in a culture and how you interact with people. And you're in this weird environment that's on a ship, isolated in the middle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the ship part's even
right,
a little bit more
so
different.
isolated, right? And you don't even have, like back then, you don't have great connectivity all the time to communicate with people. And then you're pulling into port and just going buck wild, like drinking your face off and, letting loose. And you're in your early 20s and everyone's like one-upping each other and it's really competitive. And there's just things that happen in that type of situation that are not good. And then once you see people in a certain way, you know what I mean? It's really, I don't know. There's just a lot of dysfunction that comes from that. And then as a woman too, it adds a layer to it. You know, there was a guy in my squadron, and I'm going to consciously not use any names or call signs because I definitely am not here to like poke anybody, right? But like every time he got drunk in port, he would find me and he would tell me why I shouldn't be there. He's like, let me tell you why women shouldn't be here. And it was just like, you just could set a timer. Here we go. So-and-so's drinking. It's coming. You know what I mean? And the other guys in the squadron would just sort of sit and watch him. But stuff that he would say that I just found so, you know, oh, you said you saw Top Gun and you wanted to be a fighter pilot. You should have just wanted to fuck a fighter pilot. And I'm like, oh, okay. Or
watch me.
Yeah.
Well, not that, but like
Right.
watch me. Become a fighter.
Totally. And my favorite thing he ever said to me was, you know why women shouldn't be here? Because when we're out in port and I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing, I look at you and I feel bad about it because you're there. And I was like, I don't think that has anything to do with me, first of all. Like, I think that's you and your shit, you know? But it was because, like, you know, if you get a bunch of guys together and you go out, like, and you're all at the strip club or you're all going, like, there's just this thing that happens and they're not worried about it getting back to anybody. And I think having a woman present was a consciousness. It reminded them of their wives at home, or it reminded them of their moms or whatever it was. And one of my favorite stories from that time, like, I'll never forget it. It's a core memory. Our senior junior officer had put something on the schedule early on when I joined the squadron. So it was like an official scheduled event. It was for all the junior officers, which is like 15 to 20 people in the squadron. And he sits down and he's like, hey, today we're going to talk about rats. There are white rats and there are black rats. And I want to make sure, like, you guys know the difference. And he basically says, a white rat is like, if we're all in port and you go out to dinner with Bob, Joe, and Steve, and you guys decide you're going to go to steak dinner, and you have this great meal, and then you go home and you call your wife, and you're like, oh, we just went out and had this great meal. It was really nice. Then we turned in early. Well, you didn't know that Steve and his wife had agreed they weren't spending a bunch of money. And your wife calls Steve's wife, and now Steve's in trouble. That's a white rat. And he's like, or you could be a black rat. A black rat is when, you know, you guys go out to the bar, Steve starts hitting on like some girl, takes her home, has sex with her, comes back the next day and is telling everybody about it. And you call and tell your wife, and then your wife tells his wife. That's a black rat. And he's like, don't be a rat. Basically, like, shut the fuck up. Like, you're not allowed to speak of anything you see to anybody. And there were rules, like the places that we would rent when we were on deployment, we called them admins. And there were very specific rules in the admin. No significant others in the admin, no cameras in the admin, and no taking phone calls with your significant other from the admin, because they could hear stuff in the background. There would be pictures of what happened. So it was basically just to make it so, like, people can do shit they shouldn't be doing in here, and you better shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, and so that was very much ingrained in the culture. And then I have someone telling me, like, oh, you're here, and that makes me feel bad about it. And then on the same time, there's this really weird fucked up thing that happens where some of the wives are very threatened by having a woman and not all of them. Like, I will caveat all of this with, like, there were some amazing people in my squadron, like, that I have so much respect for, and were like great friends and have always been good friends, and they're great. Their wives equally as great. But there are, in any group, right, there's extremes on both ends. And so there are definitely some wives who don't like you being there, and they're not friendly, or they're mean, or they're like catty, and you're just like, I do not want to sleep with your fucking fat husband. Like, I don't know why you're sleeping with him, but I'm not interested. But they think you are.
Have you seen Paul's beard?
Right? Yeah. Like, have you seen my man? Because he's better than yours. But like, there's this weird thing, right? Because you're in a world that they'll never understand and that they're not involved in. So there's this weird thing that happens with that. And then you have this weird thing where they're coming to you, another core memory. You know, we had just gotten back from debt, and a guy in the squadron had gotten home with some stripper. He was engaged. Yeah, he was engaged at the time, marries her. They're married with 2 kids now, but clearly cheating on her. Of course, I'm not fucking saying anything. Then I go to a party when we get back, and his wife's hammered out of her mind at this. It's a Halloween party, and she's dressed up in this like Catholic schoolgirl, and she comes out and she's like, oh, Meagan, like bawling, you've got to keep an eye on him. I'm really worried he's going to cheat on me, blah, 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 like confessing that I need to babysit. Then she's like, I mean, just, and it goes on and on. And you're just like, oh,
it's
like it just, all
job.
of it is, well, you're like, it's not my job. Yeah. And like, clearly, you know, this isn't a good person and your instincts are right. He just cheated on you 5 days ago. And I'm sure it's not the first time. Like, I can't say any of this. I just have to sit there and say, oh, I'm really sorry. And like, There's just a lot
And
of.
she probably didn't do that to one of the
No,
guys.
no, of course not. No. Like it only comes to the girl. Similarly, like if there's two women in a squadron and one of them's a problem child, every man will come to the good woman and be like, you need to unfuck the bad woman. And you're like, why is that my job?
Yeah.
Like, but there's this, nope, woman, that's your problem.
Yeah.
Like you go and deal with it. So there's a lot of shit like that happens that's really awkward and not, it's not enjoyable. And then, like I said, when I went to fly Tomcats, so there were 8 or 9 squadrons. I was the only female pilot in the Navy flying Tomcats.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right. And then I go on deployment. We had one other female pilot, but she was the COD pilot. So that's the plane that brings the mail on and off. Good friend of mine. So, but she rode the boat with us into country, and then she was land based. So she wasn't so I was the only female pilot while we were in the Persian Gulf on the ship. Right. So like you can just imagine there's a spotlight associated with that. And
Certainly.
It's really easy to get in your head. And it's a really hard situation.
The one thing to add is that I just thought about is it's not like, because it's such a new thing, like a woman being a fighter pilot, it's not like you had a whole litany
Cadre.
of people. You'd be like, oh, you know what? I could go to this person, this person, this person. What'd you do in this situation? It's kind of
Right.
like, well,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out. Like, cause it's not like, you have
No,
that list.
totally. And I was really lucky because the other female aviator in my squadron, she was a Rio. Her name's Amy Tomlinson. And she's one of my dear friends to this day, but she was amazing. And we were really close, and she was a really good person to lean on. But it's a really hard situation. And it's funny, I haven't talked about a lot of this because I just retired last year. So when I've done podcasts before, I've been sort of reserved on some of it just because I'm still in the uniform. And so it's different. But like the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is if you look at female veterans who suffer from PTSD, and I have moderate PTSD and anxiety, like from basically my service time. For a lot of veterans, PTSD and anxiety come from combat situations or losing someone. For female veterans, it is predominantly from sexual assault. So my PTSD comes from sexual assault that I encountered when I was in the service. And just from really like macro harassment, basically, that happened daily, that you just became conditioned. Yeah, like you just had to deal with it so much so that like for me, I have a really big trigger when there's unethical or low integrity behavior. That triggers my anxiety because it triggers a really strong fight response where I want to kind of be like, what the fuck? And like, you know what I mean? And if you can't do that, then it triggers anxiety because it brings me back to a time in my squadron where I was putting up with a lot of shit I should not have been putting up with. And I had to just sit there and take it and keep my mouth shut. And that like, I was like, oh no, I've got it. I'm dealing with it. It's fine. But like, there was collateral damage for that, right? Like 20 years later, there's a lot of rage that comes from that. And I look back on, like, they talk about it in Speed and Angels. And I have like, it's so funny. I've gotten different feedback about that movie before, but if you haven't seen the film and you're listening to this,
It's very good. You should watch it.
it chronicles though, like my experience training in the Tomcat and going on deployment and basically having a hard time with some of my boat landings and then sort of coming out of that rut. And I'm really proud that I got out of that, right? And that was a really hard thing for me to do. But I think the thing that nobody knows, because it's just something I haven't talked about, but the thing that triggered that at its core, the first time I ever had a bad pass in a Tomcat, which really started this like mindfuck game that I was in, I was flying with a guy who had sexually assaulted me, like in my cockpit. Like, and he was someone that I flew with fairly regularly. They put him in my air wing. And that's not something that I felt remotely comfortable reporting because I would have been shunned and ostracized. I don't think I would have gotten support for that. But I'm stuck in a small cockpit with somebody who assaulted me. And then I'm no shit, having a little bit of trouble compartmentalizing that. And then, you know, I remember then getting shit because I had made an error and I was trying to communicate with someone on like a chat. Amy, my roommate, was off the ship, and I was venting to her on this like secret chat we use, like literally classified secret, because that was the only way to talk to her. And I was just like, I said a note, and I was like, and I've got the fucking bookend, which is when you've got like the first flight and the last flight, which that just sucks because it's a long day, with this person in my trunk, and she knew what he had done. Well, I had inadvertently not put that in a private, like discreet, and it went to a group chat, and that guy was on the group chat. So he like took it and put it in our ready room and to like make fun of me because there's something called a hit board in a ready room where you like put your name and someone's name and you talk shit about something they did. And it's supposed to be funny, but he like put that up there. And then I got like sat down by my executive officer who's like, you know, you're having trouble and we're trying to help you and you're bitching about it and blah, 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 blah. And like, I get yelled at because I'm confiding to a friend. I don't want to fly with someone who assaulted me.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So I have all that going on too. And it was just a really toxic, unhealthy thing.
And once again, it's not like me and Paul were actually talking about it, like in regards to jiu-jitsu, or he was talking about like a bike shop. Like it's different. It's not like if you went to your male senior officer or whatever, it would just be different.
Yeah.
It's not like you have a whole, I don't know the word you use, cadre, I guess it's a military, cadre of people that you could rely on that could relate to your experience. So
right. It's not relatable. And then there was like really strict rules too with sexual assault. They have like some really good programming about it in the military because it is a problem. But there's like unrestricted and restricted reporting. And if you mention it to someone who's not like a trained person, they are required then to make it an unrestricted report and everybody knows. And so like, it's just that thing. So like I'm dealing with that, right? And at that point, I'm on a combat deployment. We're flying close air support in Iraq every other day, right? So we are literally in the shit doing the thing. I'm dealing with all of this. And I'm supposed to have someone in my airplane who I trust implicitly, right? Like we're going to do something dangerous that we're putting our lives on the line. Like there should be intense trust. And
it's the exact opposite.
It's exact opposite. And that's a really like scary, unsettling place. And I will say I was extremely fortunate because they call it a TAC org, like tactical organization, who they crew you up with. And that's who you'll fly with and like pilot Rio predominantly for your flights. But there'll be a couple that you're flying with someone else. The TAC org that I had, Opie Spencer, phenomenal human being, just made admiral, couldn't be happier.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I flew, I had 550 Tomcat hours and I probably flew 400 with Opie. Like he was great, but this person was someone else. I want to be very clear about that. But I flew with him enough. And that just felt really shitty. And that's not something that men have to deal with. Like men don't think, oh, the person, like if we reject, not that I thought we would ever reject in Iraq, but you're like, I sure as shit don't want to go into country with that guy. Like what, like I'm dealing with like actual enemy and the predator in my fucking backseat. So that's really fucked up. And then you're also the only woman. So people are already watching. So I got in this really big rut. And as much as I had this amazing support system from someone like Amy and my family, and they talk about it in the film, but I had all this pressure where I wanted to like do it right for women and be this great example of a successful female fighter pilot. And there's all this like, it's intended to be fun, right? We have the hit board where you talk some shit and like all this stuff's supposed to be fun. And there's something they call forecastle follies where you go up to the forecastle of the ship and the whole air wing comes in there and the squadrons do skits and you sort of make fun of each other. And again, it's all supposed to be in good fun. And the Prowler Squadron, which Prowlers are a 4-seat airplane with 3 NFOs and 1 pilot. And there were actually 3 girls in that squadron, which was a lot. And they live right across the hall from us. And I was friends with all of them. So not only are they predominantly NFOs, not pilots, but they were spending about half their time in Iraq. They were sort of doing split ops between the ship, but they had for their skit, I'll never forget it. They started it when they had a wanted ad and it said, wanted a terminally ill cancer patient to fly with Vargas. Because they're like, she's going to fucking kill herself and kill somebody else. And I was like, and then literally nice. 250 eyes turn and look at me and they're just waiting. And they're like, you better not look upset. You better not say anything. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, I'm in a fucking I had my first pass with someone I was just assaulted by. I'm in this mental, like death spiral, stress pressure cushion. I'm the only female here. And now you're fucking joking about me killing myself from a bunch of people that don't even fly, like aren't pilots and have been land-based. Like you have no idea how hard it is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, well, I want to interject if you don't mind, because I actually had that written down about that part. There's a thing in baseball called the yips.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Okay, so the yips, it's like a psychological phenomenon.
Yeah.
People in the big leagues, people who have made it to the big leagues can get the yips, and you literally just forget, like you can't throw a strike, you can't throw the ball where you want it to go. After thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and it's ruined careers. It's pretty crazy. I don't know any friends who have like actually gotten it, but it is a real. I don't know what happens, but like your mind just disconnects. Obviously you got out of it, and it's more or less like a version of the yips. But you're talking about all this stuff, and I want to just reiterate, you're talking about landing an F-14 on an aircraft carrier. That's not like I just want to like emphasize how difficult that is. That's not like it's not like you're trying to go on a walk on a park with all that. It's like you're trying to land a literal fighter jet on a dang, I don't know how long they are, a couple, maybe 1,000 feet. Something like that.
I should know how long. Like it's such a good point. And like now that's why I look back on all of this and I have a lot of pride about the whole thing. But at the time I felt like such a fucking failure. But like, one, like that's the epitome of why Navy fighter pilots talk so much shit to every other fighter pilot. Cause we're like, the hardest thing to do in an airplane is to land on a carrier.
Yeah.
In Air Force, you don't do that. Army, you like, like none of you people do that except for us. It's really hard. It's what makes us so unique and that we're really proud about, but it's really fucking hard. Like,
I'm telling you, that's
like a day trap. Hey, you can see that's fine. But if you're on a no moon, middle of the night, you've just done 6 hours in Iraq, you're fucking tired. You're a woman, so you can't drink because you can't pee in the airplane. So you're fucking dehydrated too. You know what I mean? And then you're coming in and it's maybe shitty weather or pitching deck. Like it's really hard, right? And when I say I was struggling,
when you say really, that's honestly like that is such an understatement. I can't even overstate how much of an understatement it is. That just sounds insane.
Yeah. And it's like, it's such an uber competitive. So like when you land every time you land, you get a grade. And okay, fair, no grade. Like an okay is a 4 point, like is an A, B, or C basically. And then you can get a cut pass, which is like an F. And that's for doing something like really, really dangerous. So cut passes are fairly irregular, although I think we had 10 or 11 in my air wing on deployment. I had one, I will own it. But like, so really good pilots are going to get all okays. And we call it the greenie board because an okay gets a green, a fair gets a yellow, and a no grade gets a red.
What does a cut pass get?
I think cut pass must be, a cut pass maybe is black. No grade is red.
It's not a color you want to see.
It's not a color. So like greenies, because most people are getting okays because you're a proficient pilot. You'll have a couple fairs and maybe a no grade. So when I say I was struggling, it's because I would get like a no grade every, in a line period, I'd have like 5. So it's not like I was like eating shit every time I came back, but it's so competitive and people are so good at it. Like the bar is so high and we just eat our young, right? So like if you're down at the bottom of the air wing, everybody knows it and everyone's watching.
Another thing is like an aircraft, there's only one plane landing on an aircraft carrier at a time.
And there's a camera on.
Yeah, so there's like everybody's watching.
And the camera's on all over the ship. Yeah. So everybody knows like, and
how many people are on an aircraft carrier again?
With the air wing embarked, it's about 5,500 people.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's like a little city. Like
I mean, that's crazy because like you go on a cruise and a cruise is like extremely. You got your own room, you got malls and whatever. You got slides. This is 5,500 people in like little
bunk rooms. But I mean that's cool. And just sort of to switch gears to sort of talking about the aircraft carrier piece of it. The thing that I always like to tell people that if they're not remotely have never been on a carrier or don't know much about it. The thing that I think is most impressive about all of it, yes, the carrier landings for sure, number one. The second thing that I think will blow people's minds, at least I think it's worthy of being impressed by, is when we're doing daytime recovery, it's all zip lip, meaning there's no comms. So the way an aircraft carrier works is there's cycle time. So like we're going to launch airplane and then like an hour and 15 minutes later, recover airplanes. And you're going to launch all the aircraft first to make room on the deck. And then you're going to recover all the aircraft. And then you kind of clean it up and you keep going. So when you come back for recovery, there's about somewhere between 2 to 4, there's like 2 jets per squadron for pointy nose. So let's just say 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, maybe 10 aircraft coming back. We check in at distance, but then to basically safeguard the location of the carrier so that people can't hone in on where we're talking. Like no one talks, but we know what altitude we're supposed to come in. Everybody else knows what altitude they're supposed to come in. Like, who else should be at your altitude. You find them, you hawk the deck. Like everything is you're just watching and you know what's supposed to happen. And then you call it hawking the deck. So like, one, because we were so big, they like to land the Tomcat and get it out of the way. So we got to break the deck is what they call it. And like, people would always race to break the deck because if you break the deck, you can do what we call a shit hop break. So this is going to get into all kinds of fighter pilot stuff. So military aircraft, when we come into land, we do something called a break. So we come in at high speed and a Tomcat, 500 knots.
How fast is that in miles an hour? You said that the other night, and I'm like,
yeah, well, it depends on altitude, right? Yeah. But God, miles per hour, it's got to be like 600 plus. If I got that wrong, someone listening to this don't make fun of me. I don't remember the equations. It's fast. So we come in and then you do a really high G turn. So when you put extra G on the airplane, it puts a lot of drag. It helps you slow down. So you do like 180 degree hard turn. So if you're coming in at 500 plus, you're going to be at 6-7 Gs. Slow down. And then as soon as you get down below gear speed, so you can't put your landing gear down when you're too fast, you'll rip the gear off. So like 250 knots, you drop your gear, you put your flaps down, you keep slowing down, and you're going to land around 130 knots is sort of your landing speed. If you're the first ones in, then you can basically brake before the bow of the ship. And it's like with the ship moving away from you, if you do it awesome, you basically will just be like in a high G turn and your gear won't come down to you're almost rolling into the groove, which is like the last little like 18 seconds of when you're landing. And you'll like get the gear down, and if it's perfect, it's like they call clear deck right as you're coming into the groove, because
and that's what you want. Like
that's what you want. Like that's like the epitome of fighter pilotness. Like that's like you fucking nailed it, right? But if you're not the first jet, so like you come in as a section. My section lead does the shit hot break. I have to go 4 seconds up from him so that we have spacing between us for him. Like at the carrier, it's going to be longer spacing than that. And then all this like the jets that come behind us, now the pattern is full, right? There's other airplanes in the pattern, so you can't do the shit hot break. So point being, there's this symphony that's happening over top of the ship where everyone's just rotating. So the Tomcats are the first ones, we're rotating, then the Hornets, then then it's going to be the E-2, or back then whatever whatever they were, the kind of the big planes at the top. But you're hawking the deck, and what you do is you learn to watch it, and you can see them launching, and you're like, hey, they got to launch this number of airplanes. So you start counting, and you see, all right, there's 2 Tomcats, there's the other 2, there's the Hornets, there's this, there's that, and they're like, okay, last one, we got to go. And like, what the timing is. I don't remember what it is anymore, but you'd be able to know, okay, if they're launching from count 1, if we go right now, by the time I get around, come into the break, because once they get the last one launched, then they have to kind of like prep where the catapults were, so that it's not a clear deck right away. But if you get it perfectly timed, they'll be like, hey, clear deck, and you're running in, right? And so it becomes sort of a competitive thing of like, how tight can you get? And I was a wingman, so like my lead was always doing the stuff, but you just like learn to watch it.
It's still wild.
But and then the people above you, they'll be like, oh, they're going. Okay, we got to come down to and like, so then everyone just starts sort of circling down, but you have to be you just have to have really good situational awareness and know exactly how many airplanes are going to be, know who's where and who's moving, and but all of it's done completely with no comms whatsoever.
That's the craziest part.
Yeah, and I just think that's really cool. I always thought that was cool.
And that is cool, because that's, once again, I'm like, I don't know how to internalize how difficult that would be. Like, even with all the training, they just sound, to me, somebody who's never flown a plane, that sounds insane. Yeah. And you mentioned something just now that I'm glad you mentioned, because I kind of forgot it. The G's. Yeah. There's a scene in Speed Angels 2 where I think you pass out, right? Yeah, but it wasn't even under G. That's the funny part. It was at the end? So when you have to go through centrifuge training if you're a military pilot, and it's what it sounds like. It's just going to spin and spin, and it's going to mimic G. But it's definitely just a simulation. It's not like, it definitely is G, but it'll make you sick, where like maybe you don't get sick in the airplane, but it'll like, just because it's spinning, right? So you do a couple different like mission profiles where it's just like, okay, here's 3 Gs, here's 5 Gs, here's 7 Gs, and then like here's 7 Gs looking over your shoulder. Here's like, you have to do these couple things. And I was doing, and there's 2 clips in there, and they're both really funny for different reasons. But they're showing me, and what I laugh is if you remember from the film, like the first one, they're showing you pull G, and when you pulling Gs, they teach you the anti-G straining maneuver, which is just like you tighten up your quads, your butt, your core, and you're basically trying to, people G lock when they don't have enough blood coming to their brain. So when you pull G, it's pulling everything down. So you basically are tightening all your muscles to keep your blood up towards your face. And then you basically hold your breath. So you're kind of, and then you'll just take very quick breaths so that you're kind of keeping pressure on everything. And in the centrifuge, you can see it in the video, but when you start to G-lock, which is when you'll lose consciousness, first thing that happens is you'll lose color vision. So everything goes black and white. And then your peripheral will start to go, and your vision will start to come in, and then you'll be full blackout, and you can't see, but you're still conscious. And that's literally like right before you're going to G-lock. So in the centrifuge, you can see me, and all of a sudden I'm like, and my eyes are super wide because I'm blacked out and I'm trying to see, and I can't see. So I'm opening my eyes really wide, but I can't see because like the blood's basically being pulled out of my optic. And then that's when you pass out? And then you would pass out next. So I just like, I keep it together, and then I stop, and then I'm just spinning at 1 G.
And I'm like, hey, I don't have color back yet. Like, I don't feel right. And they're like, man, that's never happened to anyone before. And they're like, do the, the hick. And so I'm doing the NIG straining maneuver at 1G. And I'm like, no, I still can't see color. I don't feel so good. Like, and then I just like pass out. And they like stop the thing and they're like, we've never had anyone pass out not under G. And they're like, we're taking you out. Like, we don't even know what that is. And I was like, I don't know what it is either.
What does that feel like? Like first off, what is G? Is that
G is just saying, like, so when we walk around, we walk around at 1G, just the normal force of gravity. And when you start to put force on the airplane, you're pulling G's, or like basically if you're doing a big turn, it's just going to basically make it feel like 2, 3, 4, 5 times the force of gravity. So it's increasing the pull on your body, which then is draining the blood. It's pulling your blood towards your feet.
What's the highest G that you've been under, or however you would say
the highest G? So the Super Hornet and the Hornet have a G limiter, which means if you just take the stick and plant it, it's going to go to the max G limit and hold you there, unless you spike it. Like if you go really fast, you'll go too quick for the G limiter. The Tomcat didn't have a G limiter. The Tomcat was limited to 6.5. The Hornet, I think, gosh, someone's going to again roll their eyes at me. I think this Hornet was 7.5. I overstressed. The Tomcat was a really sweet move. A full G. Like normally if you overstress by like 0.1. I overstressed by a full G. So like 6.5 was the max. I went to 7.5, and then the G limiter in the Hornet would have kept me below. What does
7G feel like? Like what is, like, for somebody who's never been?
I'm trying to think of anything that feels like it.
Because it looks miserable. Like the videos of people in the centrifuge.
Yeah, the centrifuge is really, it just makes you sick. If you're like, normally when you're pulling G, it's when you're pulling off of a target and you'll do like a 5G pull, not a 9G pull from Top Gun Maverick. Or mostly it's when doing your dogfighting. And it feels really like you just feel heavy. Like everything feels heavy and you just feel like you've pressure all over your body and you're sort of being pinned down.
Like you can't move. Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. But normally it's when you're dogfighting. So it's just like, fuck yeah. Like you don't really care. Like when I was a student, it was really bad. I was a T-45 student and we were doing 3-plane BFM, basic fighter maneuvers, dogfighting. And I remember like I was sort of extending to pitch back in to take a shot, and I'm solo, so I didn't have an instructor with me, but I'm pitching back in and I went full black vision. And I remember consciously thinking, like, I think I just needed to go 2 more seconds and I'll be turned around. I'll just hold, like, and so I just held it and luckily, like, didn't G-lock myself. But, like, you just get excited about what you're doing. It's sort of like when you're playing sports. You might be in a lot of pain, running really hard or whatever, but, like, you're doing the thing. Yeah. So it's the adrenaline. Yeah, the adrenaline's pumping, and that's the fun part. So you're kind of, and you normally, like, you don't sustain Gs for very long periods of time. It's like a couple seconds you're going to be pulling high G, and that's it. And then you're going to release it because you just don't have a need to do it, and you're going to run out of energy in the airplane. Like if you perpetually pull 7 Gs, you're just going to slow down, and then there's no way to pull that much.
What's the fastest you ever went on
a Tomcat? I went. It's funny. Everyone's like Mach 2. Things don't go that fast. I think like 1.06 is the fastest I remember looking at. So
in normal people speak.
So gosh, I don't even know what that would be. 800. I don't know. So again, someone's going to be like, she doesn't know the conversions. I don't know, 700, 800 miles an hour.
That's crazy.
But honestly, it's way more fun to be down at a low level at 200 feet going 350 knots than it is to be going Mach 1 at 40,000 feet. Because there's no ground rush. There's no, like, you literally just see a number change on the dial and you're like, oh, I'm going fast.
But when you're low, you can kind of just
But it literally doesn't feel any different than being in an airliner and looking out the window. And you're just like, oh, we're going quick, right? Like it doesn't feel fast, but it's way faster than your car. But if you're down doing a low level and you're in like a river ravine and you're going between mountains, you're like, yeah, that feels fucking cool, right? Like there's ground rush and you can get a sense of how quickly you're moving. So, yeah, I don't know. It's better at low altitude.
That sounds like just about as high of a thrill as you can get, like in terms of, I mean, I don't know how else you'd go faster than that as a human.
Yeah, no, that was like, and kind of going, I dreamed about this airplane, right? I wanted to fly this airplane. Then I get to fly it. And like your second flight in the Tomcat, when you're a student, you do like a zoom climb where you go to 500 feet over the water and you accelerate up to, it might have to be like 500, 550. And then you park the nose at 70 degrees nose high. And they just say, when you hit 350, roll over and like level off. And I mean, you climb up to like 30,000 feet. You're just like, it's like a rocket.
And how long?
I mean, it doesn't take that long. Like it's pretty quick, right? Like,
Holy cow.
but I mean,
From 500, just
just they're
straight
basically
up.
they're like keep going until the engines run out of juice is basically what you're doing. Because in the Tomcat it had I think a Viper is the only positive thrust to weight ratio. Like I think if Viper the engine it can like keep accelerating, but like everything else eventually you're gonna run out of juice.
What's a Viper?
F-16.
So is that what they're using now? Like what
So the Air Force still flies the F-15, F-16, the F-22, and the F-35. The Navy flies the F-18, the F-35.
What's the newest one?
F-35 is the newest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that like, have you been in one or seen one?
I've definitely seen one. I have friends who are instructors in them. You know, they're cool, next gen. Like they can just do amazing things. If you like, there's some great videos and air shows of just sort of the turns they can do and the speeds they can fly. It's really cool.
Yeah, that seems insane.
Yeah.
And one thing that I didn't really think about until I heard you had to switch, like learning one airplane, that seems difficult enough. And then when you were learning the F-18 Super Hornet, what's the learning curve like with that? Like, is it completely different or is it like a completely different language?
It's like a shorter syllabus because, when you're learning to fly, like your first fleet aircraft, so your first gray aircraft, you're learning how to fly it and you're learning how to employ it as a weapon. So a lot of the tactics you already know going from one plane to another. So you don't have to relearn that, which is super helpful. You just have to relearn the systems that you're using to do those tactics. And the fact that you have more experience, you'll go through a slightly abbreviated syllabus. So you won't do what a new pilot will do. There's just like different versions of syllabus that you do. So it's definitely easier. And I think it depends on what airplanes you transition from, right? Like if you went from an S3 to an F-14, those are both like older airplanes that are sort of analog. And so not as much like, you know what I mean? They're sort of both have their nuances, but going from a Tomcat to a Super Hornet, I use this analogy all the time because it perfectly explains it. But it's sort of like when you're 16 and you get your driver's license and your dad's like, hey, here's your first car. It's a 1976 Chevelle. And there's no power locks, no power steering, no power windows. Like it leaks a little bit. You know what I mean? You got to really like muscle it around. But if you can drive that and then one day your dad comes in and is like, it's leaking too much. I don't think it's that reliable. Here's, a 2025 or 24 M5 BMW. And you're like,
okay, cool.
Gucci, everything super nice, still really cool. But like, you're going to be able to figure out how to, you're like, oh, this is a new system. I don't know, but it's intuitive and it's easier and it's better to learn, like it's easier to learn. So the Super Hornet, you had this sort of sexy charisma and this thing about the Tomcat that made it really fun. And then you went to the Super Hornet, which you're like, relatively, it's still cool, but it's, like it
doesn't
wasn't
have like a nostalgia to it.
It doesn't have the thing, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have like the charisma. And it was just, there's a lot of things that were, this is an auto feature. That's an auto feature. So stuff that you'd have to do manually in the Tomcat was being done automatically for you in the Super
So the
Hornet.
car analogy is a good analogy because like everything's not analog.
Right.
Everything's digital now in cars. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
So like that made it easier, I think.
Back to the aircraft carrier because I just can't like. Okay, well, first off, another thing in the documentary talks about like the first. What do you go from 0 to 200 miles an hour in like 100 or
very short amount of time.
0 to 180 miles an hour in like 200 feet?
Yeah.
What do they call that?
Cat shot, the catapult.
Yeah. So how does that feel?
Oh my God. There's the best way to describe, like you can describe that feeling a little bit better than G, but I would say the first hill on a really steep roller coaster, take that sensation times 100, and that's a cat shot.
Because it's just
yeah, it's literally like just so fast, and then when you go off the end too, there's almost like a jerk when you come off the catapult too. So it's just you're kind of like, what just happened?
There's funny audio of I guess your first one.
It's legit. My first one at a T-45, and there's so I'm like talking to myself, getting myself all hyped up, and then you're just like, holy shit. It's the payoff, right? Like all the stuff that's hard and stressful about landing, the cat shot's really, really fucking cool. I remember when I was in, when I was in the RAG. So when you go through flight school, if you're a jet pilot, you do carrier qualifications daytime before you get your wings. Then when you go to the RAG, where you get trained in your fleet squadron. So when I was being trained in the Tomcat, that's the first time you do night traps at the boat too. So it's your first night landings. And there's different ways we depart the ship day, night, and different ways we come in. And the Tomcat, the model I was flying, we did not go to afterburner when we did the cat shot. We didn't need it because the engines were strong enough. Like older, different airplanes, you'd have to go to burner, but not in the Tomcat. And when you take off during the day, you literally like take off, you do what we call clearing turns. So you just do like a small turn, and then you go straight at 500 feet for a while before you're allowed to climb. At night, you take off and you immediately climb. And
Why is that?
Just because there's like different, like, how easy it is to see other airplanes, and like if you're in visual control or like what type of control you have for the aircraft. And at night, it's just to clear away from the ship.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. But I was watching, and when I was a Tomcat student, I was seeing the instructors, because instructors will be getting some traps and cats too. And like they would take off, and as soon as they took off, they would go full burner, and it looked really cool, right? Because it's just like these two lights, because it's pitch black. And I was flying. I was flying with my instructor, and I was like, "Hey, like burner or no burner? Like what's the?" And she's like, "Nah, I don't know if you should do that. It's kind of like you're a pilot, you're a student. Like I don't think you should do it." And I was like, "Okay, like whatever you say." And then we go to do the first cat at night, and I'm literally going down the stroke, like we're in the shot, and she's like, we come off the end, I hit the gear, and she's like, "Stroke him," just go full burner, and you're,
That's insane.
It's really cool. Like it was really, really, it was a good, like I remember that. I remember her saying, "Stroke him," like just as we came off, and I was like, "This is so badass! Like I can't believe we're doing this."
That is cool that you said, like, you're right. It is kind of, that's like the green light for all the work that you've done. And then
the fun.
I mean, yeah, exactly. The fun part.
Yeah.
Is it true that the catapults on the carriers can throw a car a mile?
I don't know if they've ever tested it. I wouldn't be surprised. Like,
really?
Yeah. Like they can
throw some weight.
I mean, yeah, it can throw it gets you up to speed, right?
That's crazy.
It's pretty cool. And like when you take off, you'll set your radar altimeter to the deck's at 60, like 40, like you set it basically to beep so that if you settle off the cat, you eject. Because you can find all kinds of videos where people get a soft cat, or like the cat basically malfunctions.
Really?
And they don't have the speed they need to fly away at the end, and the plane will just like start to descend, and you won't be able to see it, and then you'll just see like ejection seats coming
and
out.
Automatically ejects?
No, you have to eject yourself.
Really?
But you can set a little thing that like yells at you if you're going low, because pilots generally, your instinct is to save the airplane, so you're going to think like, I can ride it out. And interestingly enough, the stat for the Tomcat was there was never, I don't know if this is like urban legend, right? But what I was always told when I was flying the Tomcat was every ejection from a Tomcat was initiated by the Rio. Because the pilot is always trying to like,
really,
I'm going to fly it, right? And the Rio's like, fuck that.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, and then in the Tomcat, the pilot seat ejected in like would basically lean to the left, and the Rio would lean to the right.
Okay, I've seen Okay, that makes sense, because I have seen a video.
And that's so that you kind of clear each other.
That makes sense.
And the story there, they're like, well, if the pilot goons it away in the approach turn, they're gonna you're gonna be turning like this. The pilot's gonna eject into the water. The Rio's gonna live. But if you're up on the flight deck and you're by the island, a lot of times you're like looking forward. So like that would eject the Rio into the island. So a lot of times you like would save your seat until you got away from the island, because you're like, I don't.
And then at landing, so that's the fun part.
Mm-hmm.
And the back end of that, you have the most difficult part, probably, or one of the most difficult parts. What is that? Like, you're essentially trying to get
like,
a little
how's it
latch.
work?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think I'm trying to remember if like in Top Gun Maverick, I feel like they might have a better visual for it, but there's a Fresnel lens. We just call it the ball. And there's basically a group of lights, and there's a bunch of lights that are basically right where you want to be. And that's sort of a reference point. And then there's the light that goes up and down, and that's the ball. And that's going to be a white ball. And it's white basically if it's above glide slope, but when it starts to get low, it'll turn red. And that's like you're below. And all it does is basically based on where your angle is, it's going to always show you just based on your altitude. And we have an optimal glide slope that we come into the boat from. And when a Navy airplane lands on an aircraft carrier, it's different than what you feel when you're in an airliner. Because when you're in an airliner, you come down and you feel that floating sensation. That's a flare. So like if you're at a big runway, you're always going to flare because it just sort of like gently brings it down, so you're not abusing the landing gear. If you ever go to an air show and you're looking at a military jet and you don't know if it's an Air Force or Navy jet, look at the landing gear. If they're little tiny landing gear, it's an Air Force jet. If it's big landing gear, look at a Navy jet, because it's made really robust because of like the impact of the landings. Because we have to set And I should have grabbed it, but I have my hook point over on my shelf right there for my last Tomcat
Oh, that's
trap.
what that is?
Yeah, that little thing is what stops the Tomcat on a trap. So
that little thing right there is what.
that's it. Like you can see where the wire would go, kind of where it's like there's the indentation. But when we land, we have to maintain a very specific angle of attack because that sets the hook at the right angle to be able to grab the wires. So if your like nose is flat, the hook's not going to be low enough and you're going to miss the wires. And if it's too steep, it's going to bounce and you're not going to hit the wires. So you maintain this very specific angle of attack and you're basically like slamming it down right between the 2 and the 3 wire. The perfect landing is always going to snag the 3 wire. So you would like drag forward into the 3 wire. But so you look at the ball and if it shows you a little bit above the benchmark lights, you're like, okay, I'm a little high, little power off. Whereas if it's showing you below, you're low. And if it's red, like get on it. And the other thing that makes it hard is we have something called the rooster tail. So as you're landing, the carrier has to be making wind, like it has to be making wind over the deck and it has to be moving. And
Why is that?
Just to help with for you to land the airplane.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, and the landing area is also diagonal. So as it's moving like this, your landing area is moving away from you at a diagonal as well. So as you roll behind the ship, like if you're doing a nighttime landing or like if it's bad weather, you do like a long, like straight in approach, basically, you'll have to keep on correcting to the right because it keeps moving away from you. So you're like doing those corrections for lineup as need be, but you're just looking at the ball and you're like, I'm high or low. But as the air comes over the aircraft carrier deck, so like if this is the air, it comes over and then immediately it goes down on the backside and then it kind of comes up. So right when you roll behind the boat, you're on this like upward thing where you'll feel the rooster tail where it's going to push you high. And then right where you don't want to be low, it sort of sucks you down. So as you get closer, you definitely don't want to be low because you can get pulled down. And like, that's where you can have a ramp strike or just a really scary landing, which I've definitely had those. But so there's just a lot of things like it's hard just because if you think about it, it sounds hard. But then if you think about the fact that the landing area is moving away from you and there's this like, air thing that's basically sucking you down right where you don't want to go. Like, and you learn where those things are.
And if it's at night.
Exactly.
And
all
like
those things.
And
it's windy or there's bad weather or
the waves are choppy.
Exactly. Like pitching deck and the deck's coming up and down. And there's lots of variables that can make it hard. And most of the time, like I never looked forward to it. Like I was just like, basically because it just, for me, it got definitely to a point of like, here's just an opportunity where like, I'm going to shine my ass or like, I'm going to get more, when you get in your head, it becomes a bad thing. But once I got out of that sort of rut that I was in, then like, I'll loosely say it's fun. Like it's fun to challenge yourself and do something hard. You know what I mean?
How did you get out of that rut? Like what, cause you talk about it in the documentary, and that's another thing with like yips or really anything. Like when you get into a rut with something, it's like a negative feedback loop. It's like, why is this happening? Well, let me try this and it doesn't work and so on and so forth. So how did you find yourself out of that, or how did you get yourself out of that?
I think, I don't think I know. I remember distinctly like really having, like I said, I had this great Rio, Opie Spencer, who's just phenomenal human being. Like he was a department head, so like a senior Rio, and just it was a really grounding, like stabilizing person, both in and out of the airplane. And I remember talking to him in port one day. I remember talking to him in port one day, and I was just confiding to him after I'd sort of been in this rut for a while. I was like, oh my God, I'm letting everyone down. Like, and I'm like in such this mental death spiral of like, I'm not being this great female pilot and, doing it for young girls watching and my family. And, I was basically just putting a lot of pressure on myself about setting some standard. And then I would fly and have a couple of good passes. And then I would just have one that wasn't good. And I just like completely deflated. And that just happened for a while. And it was wild. Like the documentary makes it seem like it was on workups, but it was really on deployment. It was like the first part of deployment. So it's very isolating, right? But I remember telling him this and he was like, that's shit. Like you don't have anything you need to prove to anybody. And like, I doubt your family feels like that you're like, you know what I mean? He's like, you need to talk to your family. And like, so I remember I got a line out from the ship and I remember someone just like told me some code. So I was actually able to call from my stateroom, which, and my sister answered, thank God, my older sister, Shannon. And I just remember like breaking down and telling her, like confiding into her that I was putting all this pressure on myself. And I just felt like I was really letting them down. And they thought that I was because I just got a lot of, as you would imagine, like kind of smaller town a lot of people were really stoked that I was a fighter pilot, right? Which is cool. They were all super supportive, and they're like, "That's me, I'm the fighter pilot. Babe, come over here." They're like, and I just was like, "I'm not living up to these expectations." And she was just like, "That's ridiculous." Like, "We love you." Like, and it was literally just as simple as that. Like me, it's one of those things like you don't want to admit to yourself. And once I vocalized it out loud to Opie, and then I had a conversation with my sister and like someone that I trust, and they could just sort of knock me out of it. And like, I think that brought me back to who I'd been previously, and which was why I was successful at the academy and flight school and became a Tomcat pilot. Like, I am good enough to be here. I did all the things. Like, I had really good landing grades when I CQ'd in the Tomcat. I do like, I'm a great tactical aviator. Like, I can do this, and I need to just get the fuck out of my own head. And I just did. I just like literally
That's
like,
all you needed to hear.
Yeah, it was that simple. Because I do think at that point, anyone that's gotten through flight school, gotten through training, and is out there doing it, and they're doing close air support over Iraq, they've proved they've got the skills to be there. If you start to struggle, it's a head game. And like a lot of people get into that and they cannot get their way out of it. And I was close to that point.
It's challenging.
It happens to all of us, right? It happens in take it out of everything. Playing a sport, playing baseball.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about it in baseball. I'm like, that definitely happens. And,
Yeah.
and you've done X, Y, and Z to get you to where you are. And then you're like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be here. And maybe that's why this is happening. And then you're like, wait a second, I did the same exact things to get to here that all these other people. And it's just a challenging thing to get out of a rut in life. And I think that's really cool because if you can have that, if you're blessed enough to have the people in your life that will be like, wait, you sound dumb.
Exactly.
Like, that you can confide in.
Yep.
And then like you sound kind of dumb, and it's like, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I should just take the pressure off.
Yeah. No, I think, and like when I think about that documentary, which was obviously a unique thing to be a part of, I don't even think it's yes, it's got cool flying scenes and it's about two fighter pilots, but I think to me the reason that people have me come and talk about that movie or like that resonates is that everybody can relate to really being down on themselves and like not doing something they want to do the way they want to do it. Everyone has failed at something. And I just think the story isn't what did you fail at? It's how did you overcome it? Like, what did you do to move past it? And I mean, do I like that there's a documentary and the guy's this badass like war hero comes to save the day and the female story is, oh, she was really struggling for a while. Like, and there's people.
What's the other guy's name?
Jay. Like, and people have said like, oh, why is the girl suck? And the guy, and I'm like, it's one of those don't read the comments, right?
Yeah.
Like, so part of me
That's
is
pretty
really
much
like,
everything.
right? I wish that wasn't the story, especially with a woman and a man. But I also think there's a strong story in there are a lot of people who don't get themselves out of that situation. And I did. And so like, I am proud of that. And I've faced challenges in the last 10 years since I stopped flying. And I absolutely feel like I've been able to see the path through because I'm like, that was such a pressure cooker, right? Like I was in this rut. I was super down on myself. I'd lost all my confidence. I was dealing with anxiety and PTSD and assault, like in a war zone, flying combat missions. I mean, literally so many things that just one of them is stressful, but it was like 10 different things. And I'm like, if I was able to get myself out of that, I feel so capable that there's nothing I can't face or overcome or break down and realize like, here's the path. And I think it gave me the ability to give myself a lot of grace and realize sometimes you're Maverick and sometimes you're Goose. Like, like sometimes it's going your way and sometimes it's not. And yeah, I just like, I'm so, as much as that was a really hard experience, I'm really thankful for it. It's made me who I am. Like, I think I've been successful or not, or made decisions in certain ways because of that.
Yeah. It's a proof of work too. Like you said, when you confront something, this is like, so cliche, but like, this is why doing hard things intentionally is important, because when you are confronted with something that is inevitably going to confront you that is not intentional, you have a proof of work, and you have a mountain
you're equipped.
Exactly. You're equipped, and you know oh wait, I've done hard things before. This is definitely hard, but I'm going to be able to do it. So that's really cool to hear. You mentioned it a little bit, but when you're on the carrier, because this is also something I never really had never really thought about. I knew the Navy had planes, and if I'm not mistaken, they might have more planes than the Air Force, or am I wrong about that?
I don't know what the stat is anymore. There was definitely at one point that they said the Navy could, like, Navy, I think the number of Navy and Air Force, like tactical aircraft, is probably fairly similar. But the Air Force has all the big wings too.
Okay, gotcha.
So I don't, but like
The Marines have planes.
Marines
as well,
have planes
right?
too, yeah. And the Marines will deploy on aircraft carriers and on amphibs. So we have boats, like large deck amphibs that basically have almost a full size carrier deck on them, and then they have a huge like a well that they'll fill with water, so like hovercraft and landing craft can come in and out of the boat. So like the Marines can have all their ground forces on there, and then they can do like vertical takeoff jets or helicopters at the same time.
Cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I never really put that all together, that naval aircraft, you're going to be taking off from a carrier. So it's kind of, I don't know if it's completely different from the like operational strategy of like an Air Force or Marine plane or anything like that. But when you're overseas, you were in the Persian Gulf during the Iraq War. What are you doing? Like what's your purpose for being there?
Totally. So one, like I'll answer the direct question. I think the other question you're getting at is when you think about Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and I'll be somewhat broad just to be respectful of sort of what's more confidential than other stuff. But an aircraft carrier, think like new threat, new war, new mission. We might not be able to fly over certain countries and bomb another country because then they're sort of complicit, right? We can pull an aircraft carrier up right off the base, you know what I mean? And we can start from there. The same with like the Marines can storm the beach and they've got everything to sort of take and set up a base or an auxiliary field. And then once that's set up, like the Army would come in and really like set up a more robust thing. But we are able to go anywhere. And when there are challenges with overflight or where is that, it's really far away. We don't have a base close by. How do we get the tankers? Like if it's close to water, you know what I mean? You've got a full base there with the full arsenal. So that's sort of what's unique about the Navy. When we were in the Gulf, you basically had one of two flights every day. And I'll say some units, when they deploy, they'll still do what we call unit level training flights. So they'll be like getting qualifications. When we were there, we were doing OIF missions every day, and there was no ULT. It was like just in country or
OIF means
Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Gotcha.
So when we would basically have two sections that would take off with every cycle time. One is the in-country flight, one is the airborne spare. So you'd check all systems on deck for all 4 airplanes. 2 airplanes would take off, they'd rendezvous, they'd check that once they were airborne, all their airborne systems are working. Because you can have stuff that maybe have like a weight on wheels sensor or something, so that when you get airborne, maybe it's not working anymore. You would check and make sure both airplanes are fully like combat ready. If they're not, one of the 2 airborne spares would swap in and go in country. For the airborne spares, if they're not used, they're going to basically just have some track that they're checking in the Gulf, where they're going to be like, oh, I see 10 boats in this section. Like it's just keeping an eye on what's going on. For the in-country flights for us, we'd basically fly like an hour and a half into country. We'd hit an airborne refueler, so like a big wing airplane that would just have gas that we could plug. So we'd refuel.
That's also crazy. Sorry to interrupt. But like, that's just crazy for me to even think about too. But
well, and like Air Force tankers are made for Air Force planes. So what's interesting and does it like I think it's so ridiculous that this is still how we do it, but an Air Force jet. The way it's set up is the tanker is the male end and the jet is the female end. So the tanker will have like a probe that they put into like a funnel. Mm-hmm. Navy jet's the opposite. We need a basket on the refueling airplane, and we have a probe, and we have to put the probe in the basket. Huh. Don't ask me why we do this, because then it forces you to have
like
equipped.
A little,
doesn't make any sense. So like we had all Air Force tankers in country, and we get a KC-10, which is super easy. Like it's just a nice, long, forgiving basket. Or you get a KC-135, which that's really hard to tank on. They call it the Iron Maiden, because it basically has like a long boom. And then at the end of the boom, there's a short hose and then the funnel. But to get fuel to come from it, you have to like, I'm trying to think of how to show this with the hands, but you have to get your probe into the basket, and then you have to curve the hose so there's like a C in it. And you have to maintain that C so that the fuel can, and the hose is short. Yeah. And if you get too far, it'll literally rip your probe right off. Yeah. So you have to like, it's just
all
really,
while you're going however
really fast.
Yeah,
like 250, 300, like we would normally tank, I think at like 275 or something. So tanking is hard in its own right. Now, if you're a bad ball flyer, you end up going up to a tanker more frequently. So I actually got really good at tanking. But so you'd go ahead at tanker, then you'd go to what we call them a kill box. It's just a grid over the country. And it's just like letters and numbers, just like any grid you'd see. And they'd be like, 94 Alpha Quebec, 88 Alpha Sierra. And you would know I'm going to this kill box. And the kill box normally is over a city. So I'm going to Baghdad, I'm going to Mosul. And when we were there, it was a pretty like more calm time during the war. So most of our flights were really just, we'd check in with some ground troops and we would have, charts, and they'd say, hey, we're to go on route purple to point F, like whatever the thing was. Got it. Hey, can you just look out in front of our convoy? If you see anything that looks suspicious, let us know. And so, hey, a truck just stopped on the side of the road for a while. And so the convoy would stop and they might go check it out. So you were just like big brothers watching, eye in the sky, giving them some, comfort that you were there.
Yeah, definitely. I could see how that'd be comforting knowing there's a damn F-14 or whatever.
Yeah. So you're just looking for threats. And that was most of the flights. And so I did 33 missions in Iraq, and I would say 30 of them, I'd say like 25 of them were like that. 4 or 5 were, we're like socked in the goo. I'm just doing circles in a cloud for 2 hours because I can't see anything, but they want to keep me there because I have a GPS bomb in case we need it. You know what I mean? But there were a couple of flights where you would get called in, and they would just, and that like, those are the moments I'm most proud of. But they would call in and they'd say, hey, we have a tick, which means troops in contact. In this grid, buster, we need you to buster and get there right now. Buster means like full afterburner, like as fast as you can get, like people are dying, get over there. And so I got 2 or 3 flights like that where they called us in. And I remember one, it resonates with me the most because that's exactly what it was. It was Baghdad, buster, troops in contact. We check in. The troops on the ground don't have the radio that we have, so we can't talk directly to them. So we're getting relay through another person. So they're talking to someone who's talking to us, and we check in and we're like, what's going on? We've got this weapons. Like, what do you need from us? And they're pinned down. They cannot figure out how to egress, and we immediately find the good guys and we're like, hey, 500 meters this way is where they're shooting from. They need to egress here, so we just tell them everything we can see. And we're like, do you want us to strafe?
Yeah.
Do you want us to, we want to rain the fury, you've trained and you want to be the hero and come in and do the thing. And they were like, no, danger close. They needed to know where to go. Cause they literally were very close and heavily, almost fully surrounded. And they said, can you just come down and give us a show of force? And a show of force is just a flyby. They're come down super low, super fast, pop up some flares, both to sort of scare them a little and for your own protection in case someone has a manpad, a surface to air missile, and do that first. So come down 200 knots, 500 knots or 200 feet, 500 knots, come screaming through. And generally at that point, they know this is the warning. In case you didn't know we were here, we are here. And we're not going to. So, and that tactic works very effectively in a lot of situations. So we come down, we do this flyby. Immediately the bad guys sort of retreat and give enough space for our troops to evade and get out of there. And then we're like, do you want us to and they're like, no, they're out of here. Our guys are evading. You're good. Just track them, keep an eye on what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. So we didn't have to drop. And so it's funny because I wouldn't say it's funny. It's this weird phenomenon that's hard to explain, I think, to civilians, because it's strange in the sense that you don't want to kill people, but you've trained your whole life for this moment. And so you want to implement, you want to execute, you want to do the thing. So you're kind of it's weird that you're disappointed that you didn't get to, there were guys in my squadron who literally strafed down a street and someone was about to do an RPG and blow up a whole unit and they killed the guy. And you're something out of a war movie, right? But I look back on that and I'm I had a huge impact on a large group of people's lives and I didn't have to kill anybody. I could come in and do something and just being there made a huge impact in their lives. So that's it was just a cool, I felt all the work paid off for something. Even if it was, I only had 2 other missions where I felt we did something, right? That made an impact. But I'm if I worked from 10 to, at that point I'm 25 and it's for that one moment and those whatever number of people were able to get out of Baghdad that day and go home, you're
pretty cool.
Good trade-off. You know what I mean? It's really grounding and helpful to when you're in this shit mentally and stressed out and all these things, being able to turn all that noise off and focus on the mission and deliver and do what you need to. And it reminds you why you're here and what you're doing and the impact that it has. And I think we absolutely don't get that in so many of the ways we apply ourselves in a day-to-day. And it's great because, any job I have now, if someone starts to get stressed, I'm literally it's not life or death. It's going to be fine.
That's it's a perspective. If anything, it's a massive perspective shift because you're oh, wait, this is, remember that one time?
Yeah.
But no, it is hard to quantify. I feel even on your other missions. I mean, it's hard to quantify that you didn't like really get into it, but like, even the presence of people like yourself and fellow what would you say, naval aviators or fighter pilots? What would be the problem?
Fighter. I'd probably say like fighter guys or pilots or I don't know.
Whatever they would be called. Just the presence of those people in yourself and the machines being there. Like I'm trying to imagine being like some Iraqi guy and just seeing a dang F-14 fly over and like, oh yeah, maybe
time to go.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'll leave these guys alone.
Yeah.
And then you're exactly right. The ability to say, you know what, I just helped that whatever troops those were be able to go back to base and have another day. That's pretty dang cool. And not a lot of people can say that they've done that. Yeah.
Like it was good. It was just, I have a lot of pride about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it. I mean, it's something to be proud of because, I mean, another thing, 10 to 25 years old, that's literally 15. That's 15 years. And as you said, it's not like you couldn't take any time off from that 15 years. It's not like you could take a semester or a year off. It's like that was literally 15 straight years of head down, sacrificing this for that.
Yeah.
And then to be able to have it happen, that's pretty dang cool.
Yeah. Like I said, I own that I made a lot of sacrifices and worked my butt off, but I got really lucky and I had an incredible opportunity, you know, and I just decided to take, you know, to swing for it. So that was cool.
How important were, I mean, obviously we talked a little bit about earlier that like you were in a unique position because it wasn't like you had a bunch of mentors or people that you could directly relate to, but how important were your mentors going through all the things that you went through?
I think huge. You know, I mentioned Opie Spencer, huge. He was like so grounding. Amy Tomlinson, having that, and like she was my roommate. So that was like, if I hadn't had her, I'm not sure I would have come out of it because I would have been really isolated. I also I was lucky that I had some great pilots in my squadron, in my air wing that I really respected who were good people. Like when I was talking about the actual flying thing, like I'm having trouble, you know, Amy, I could ask any question to. Never makes fun of a question, which is like such a great skill to have. But I remember, for instance, there was a guy, Shaggy, who's one of the best, like probably the best pilot in our squadron. He was also one of our landing signals officers, so one of the people that grades your landings. And at the end of your line periods, one of the LSOs from your squadron is going to debrief you on your line period and sort of talk to you. And he would always debrief me. I always got Shaggy, and he always just like he was such a good pilot, and he was not arrogant. He's like, hey, who's boltered twice and bolters when you miss all the wires and you have to go around? You know, who boltered twice and has had to go up into the tanker? Me. Who's had a cut pass? Me. Who's like, he did this talk to be like, hey, I've struggled too. We can all do this. And like, he was just a really down to earth, good person, but he would always give me a great debrief and I could always go to him with questions, which I felt lucky. And I also appreciated that one day, like, I can't remember when, but he told me, yeah, you know, I always pick like when we, cause you know, there's 15 pilots. And so each of them debrief 3 or 4, whatever the number is, you know? And he's like, I always want to debrief you. You know why? Because you listen. Like, you don't argue with me. You don't make excuses for why your landing wasn't good. You just listen and you try to get better. He's like, there are a lot of pilots in the squadron that they might be better ball flyers than you, but they can't take feedback and they think their shit doesn't stink. And he's like, you know, and so I was like, okay, I'm glad that at least I have a rep that I own my shit and I'm trying to get better. So I had him as a great mentor. And then I think the other mentor that had a huge impact on me specifically with my military career was after that tour. And I'll tell you, I was mentally fairly broken at the end of that. How long was it? I was there for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And the thing that made our tour hard too is because we were the last of the Tomcat squadrons. We literally it was me and our squadron and one other, one on the final deployment. We came home and transitioned to Super Hornets. So I was the last new pilot that joined the squadron. And then there were 3 other Rios that joined when I joined. So we were at the bottom. It was like sort of order of, you know, who showed up when. We were the last new people and we didn't get any new people for 2 years because like no more new people were coming through the pipeline. So we had to wait till we transitioned to Super Hornets and then we got new people. And so just that lack of fresh blood and change and giving people a chance to grow into different roles and changing the dynamic of the people became really toxic. So I was very broken at the end of that tour. I just, I'd come out of my rut, but there had just been enough dick behavior. Like I was pretty spent on it. And my next tour, I went to do an Admiral's Aid tour, which is definitely not like a standard tour. It's a good tour to do. So you're like a personal assistant for an admiral. And just won the lottery because I worked for this guy, Rear Admiral Mark Benzel, one of the best Americans I've ever met. He was an S3 NFO. So S3 used to be what we used to do tanking off the carrier. He was just like the best leader, the best officer, one of the best people I have the privilege of still knowing. And I went from just being so cynical and bitter and like angry about the way I'd been treated and like the leadership that had let certain things transpire. And then I went and worked for this guy who was like the example of how to do it. And I got to work for him for 2 years, and and those are normally they're pretty arduous, like hard tours that people don't want to stay in. I was like, sir, I'd be your aide for 30 years. Like,
that's awesome.
You know what I mean? He was a great guy, and he's definitely someone that we don't talk often, but if I need to make a hard choice, he's someone that's in the top 2 or 3 people that I'm going to call and I'm going to ask his opinion. He's awesome. And then when I went, I was an instructor pilot after that in the Super Hornet and Hornet. And I got to bring him over to the squadron and take him flying one day, which was really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It was really fun. But so I'd say those are the Opie, Amy, and the Admiral. And then just as far as like flying, and I thought leading by example of not being a cocky asshole. Like, and he was cocky because he was really good, but like not in a funny, appropriate way. But he was very approachable, would be Shaggy. And he was just someone that I felt really comfortable asking questions and getting help from.
That's awesome.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, which is like so. I mean, I'm pretty young. I'm 24, so I feel like even in my age, I went to 2 schools to play baseball, and just the difference in leadership that I had there, and the reverence that I had for one, and then sort of the distaste I had for another. It kind of the same way. The first one for me was a little bit, and obviously this is like. Not to compare it to military.
But you can. It's the same thing. It's people. It's people and relationships.
There's much more pressure in one, and the amount of responsibility and all that stuff and what you were doing was significantly stronger. So I'm not comparing that, but it definitely having a mentor or a group of people that you can go to in times like that. I just can't imagine how much that would change your life almost. Like you said. Yeah.
When I talk to I'll speak to I love speaking to sort of like middle school, high school kids a lot about, how do you go and do the thing? And there's people from all different backgrounds who've all are lucky or not lucky and how many people they have in their corner. And I'm like, hey, one, I'll tell you, you don't need anyone in your corner. You can do it on your own if you really want to. But that being said, just remember it only takes one. Like if you've got like that one person you can go to, and feel comfortable really like letting your guard down, that can just make a huge, huge impact. So be the type of person that you want, like show up for people the way you want them to show up for you. Right. Yeah. And I think the other good side effect of all of and even the jerks probably from my squadron somehow got this as well. But going through those really like crucible experiences, it teaches you how to show up for people, and like, I went through some hard shit and I had some amazing people support me. And so now I think I'm a really good friend to the people that I hold in my tight group because I know how important it is. And I know how when they've shown up for me, it's really made a big impact on the trajectory of my life. And so I try to show up for people in the same way. So I think that's a good second order impact of the stress.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you miss about it? Like
just
anything
the fly,
in particular?
Yeah. Just going and do a dogfighting flight and it's just stuff, and coming in for the shit hot break and the Tomcat at 550, it's just stuff that it's hard. You're still young, but I almost think of that as Meagan Varley. That was my maiden name, it was almost a different person.
Yeah.
It feels like such a long time ago. It seems a little surreal sometimes, but yeah, just the novelty of oh, what are you doing today? Oh, I got this bombing flight and then we're gonna go to the old club and get drunk and then we're gonna go do this, it was, especially in the Tomcat, it was as close to the movies you're gonna get. I mean, we were the last Tomcat squadrons and we were working hard, playing hard. And it was a good time and it was perfect to be doing it in your 20s. I would not have wanted to be doing it in my 30s, but it was fun. But people ask me that question all the time, do you miss flying? And I'm like, you don't get to just fly. You can't with it comes everything else. And I don't miss collectively all of it. Yeah. And I think in a very subconscious way, I've landed myself in a small town in Montana away from Navy squadrons because I knew subconsciously I didn't want to be around that environment anymore.
Yeah, there's also worse places to be.
Yeah, it's also God's country here, and it's beautiful, and people are amazing. But I definitely like being far away from like the communities that are right next to bases, because there are a lot of people that I flew with, and they're all still in those towns, and they're all still drinking with each other, and they're all doing the same thing 20 years later. And I'm not judging that, but that's not for me. I'm glad that I did it, and it was a good chapter, but I'm glad that we're doing other things now.
That's awesome. Have you ever flown a civilian plane?
Yes, I have just a little bit of time. At the Naval Academy, you get a little bit of flight time before you go to flight school, and then just a little bit of time in a Cessna. But like Paul and I I'd love to get a plane out here eventually.
Cool.
My neighbor's got a plane. Like we have access where we can go flying if we wanted to. And I'd love to expose the kids for that. But my problem is my husband's 6'6" and I got 3 kids. So it's going to have to be a big plane. I don't think I make enough money for that yet, but yeah, maybe someday.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, like I said, firstly, thank you for your service. It really is something special. Thank you for inviting us over for dinner and having us in your home.
Thank you for coming. It was fun.
And then thank you for this. This has been really special. I really appreciate it, Meagan.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. Appreciate the time.